Good evening, everyone here in New York, and greetings to everybody who is watching on live stream. We welcome you to a celebration of the 1006th birth anniversary of Acharya Abhinavagupta, with a talk by our very distinguished guest, Professor Arindam Chakrabarti. The moderator will be our own Swami Sarvapriyananda, and the subject of Professor Chakrabarti's talk is On Attention to Relations, the Secret Sky of In-Between. Our thanks go to our partners in tonight's event, the Indo-American Arts Council and the Mattu Center for India Studies, Stony Brook University. Professor Chakrabarti earned a doctorate in philosophy from Oxford University. Philosophy of language and logic, metaphysics, philosophy of mind, and Indian philosophy are his major areas of specialization. He has been a visiting professor at the Institute of Advanced Studies in Edinburgh, Scotland, the Sanskrit University in Tirupati, India, at Trinity College, Cambridge, and at the National Institute of Advanced Study, Bangalore, India. In his teaching and research, Professor Chakrabarti has been trying to combine analytic classical Indian, especially Indian logic and Kashmiri Shaivism, and continental philosophies. Besides numerous papers in journals and anthologies, his major publications include his book on negative existentials and fictional discourse, Denying Existence, an introduction to 20th century Western epistemology in Sanskrit, and 5 books in Bangla, the latest on the philosophy of food and clothing. His co-edited volumes include Knowing from Words with B.K. Matalal, Universals, Concepts and Qualities with P.F. Strawson, Apoa, Buddhist Nominalism with Mark Sideretz and Tom Tillemans, and Mahabharata Now. The Eastern Philosophy of Consciousness and the Humanities Project, with its focus areas on imagination, concepts, and emotion, has recently taken off under his guidance. In 2018-2020, he was the inaugural holder of the Nirmal K. and Augustina Mattu Endowed Chair in Classical Indic Studies at Stony Brook University, New York. Please join me in welcoming Professor Chakrabarti.
Om Nada Brahmatma Bhutam Jagadidam Akhilam Bodhayantam Prabuddham Mitre Shatrau Samanam Taru Mriga Manujan Sarva Jivan Namantam Vedante Nityamagnam Pranava Rava Ghanam Prema Piyusha Purnam Shri Sita Ramadasam Smara Mati Jadatam Chettum Unkaranatham Sa Shrir No Mangalam Kuryat Ya Jnana Ichha Kriyatmika Nada Bindu Kalatita Tripurottama Sundari Pashyanti Rupinim Devim Vaikari Madhyamakramat Sambandha Buddhi Rupam Tam Ashraye Jananim Param. Relations are everywhere. People's lives and varieties of the ways of the world are subjected to and saturated with different relations. And the examples I will take will seem like contemporary our lives, but they were exactly the examples taken by Abhinavagupta a little over 1,000 years before in Kashmir. And he summarized after counting the different relations in which he is not talking about anything high spiritual. He is talking about ordinary life. And he summarized by saying, Sambandha adhina. Adhina means subject to, determined by. Determined by relations, Sambandha adhina, chitra, vichitra, variety, yam lokayatra. Our ordinary conducting of our lives is subjected to and is suffused with relations. The king and his subjects. It can be the prime minister and his subjects, or the president and his subjects, people. It can be employer and employee, boss and a subordinate. Relation between mother and child. A very different relationship between father and child. Relation between teacher and student. Okay. The relationship between Sarvapriyananda ji, the teacher, and me, a student. And wife and husband. Eater and food. Every morning, breakfast, lunch, dinner. Relation between guru and disciple. Between, Abhinav Gupta's example, between buyer and seller in a marketplace. Between attacking country and attacked country. Another relationship. I'm putting everything back to Abhinav Gupta, but the example of that I'm taking is not Abhinav Gupta's. Russia and Ukraine. Speaker and listener. These are the ordinary worldly relationships. But however worldly they may sound, at the end of this talk, you will see Abhinav Gupta following the lines of this Vijnana Bhairava, okay, a tantra which is highly respected by all Kashmiri tantrics, and is actually supposed to be a part of a bigger tantra called Rudra Yamala. All these ordinary relationships, if one focuses, I'm actually summarizing the punchline of the entire talk. If one focuses not on the nodes, not on the king, not on the subjects, not on husband, not on wife, but notices the relation between them. Not me and my beloved, but that which links me to the beloved. Not the doctor only, not the patient only, but the treatment which is a relationship between them. Because the therapy, in a different way, has to be focused upon by both the healer, the doctor, and the healed. If the healed constantly, if the patient constantly thinks, what is it doing to me? How am I? They cannot be healed. If the doctor is saying, I had this experience myself, that a surgeon did a surgery of one of my mitral valves in the heart. And next morning, I was in the intensive care and I was writhing in pain. And the doctor came with some foreign visitors in Stanford. And he was showing one of his successes, which is me. And I was so much in pain, in spite of being drowned for the next 1 year by oxycodone. Right? But that day, next day, I was saying, no, I'm in pain, please do something. And he sort of looked at me, but more importantly, looked at himself, the surgeon, and said, you may be in pain, the rest of the body may not work, but the repair I have done to your heart will be always there. It sounded like, even if you die, that heart valve will be all right. This is when the doctor and the surgeon focuses on himself. Okay? And it's not that surgeon only, all of us, even when we enter into our relations, we cannot leave behind our narcissism. We focus on ourselves. It doesn't matter whether I am the patient or the doctor. But Vijnana Bhairava Tantra is saying, you don't have to necessarily just forget about yourself and others, but do not emphasize one of those relata, the related things. Emphasize in the middle. Of course, this is said in the highest spiritual meditative experience, but I'm trying to put it in all ordinary relations also. Okay? Take the commercial buyer-seller relationship. It's best done to best everybody's interest. If even profit is best if you notice the transaction that is going on in between. From different points of view, two different points of view, but it's the middle where the essence lies. So that's basically, and the verse from which I've got it is verse number 106, I'll come back to it, of Vijnana Bhairava, which says, again adding this simplest and the most mysterious meaning to the term yogi. Okay? All of us who were trained in arithmetic, in the Indian languages, we know the word for addition. The first arithmetical function you learn. What is it called? Addition, yoga. That's what it's called. Connecting one thing with another and seeing the totality. In fact, multiplication, which sounds a little harder to the kindergartner, is actually multiple times adding. So adding the self to God is one kind of yoga. Now, there also it seems like the two are most important. But in between the two is that sign of the Red Cross. Doctors Without Borders. The plus sign. Okay? That's Sambandha. And 106 Vijnana Bhairava says, Grahya Grahaka Samvritti, an attitude or mental awareness of I am the eater, I am the viewer, I am the smeller. And that's the smell. That's the viewed color. That's the object. I am the subject. That's the object. This awareness is common to everybody. You don't need any initiation. You are from childhood when you are born. Okay? Even if you don't know the name, that woman who is giving me breast milk, that's mom. Grahya, my object. Okay? For the rest of my life, my job is to extract as much affection, attention, care I can from that particular body. Okay? Even after her death, if there is any money that she left for me. So it's just taking from that, grahya. And I'm the grahak. It's important. No one, I suffer so much, nobody else knows how much I suffer. Yes, there are other people who are suffering, but my suffering is very special. That's grahak. And the grasper. This is samanam, sarvadehinam. All embodied beings have these two, awareness of these two. What is special? Yoginam the visheshoyam. What is special for a yogi is that the yogi can be indifferent to both of these ends, the edges, the nodes of the grasper and the grasper, and focus in the middle. Sambandhe savadhanata. The word savadhan, which the Indian military uses as a translation of attention. In German it's called Achtung. Right? It is a connector of the word sa, which means with, and avadana. Avadana means attention. So, I remember we had to do a little bit of NCC in college or something. So you learn, Savadhan and Vishram. These were the alternatives. Okay, Vishram is relax, and then Savadhan. Both words are very important in Kashmir Shaivism. Vishranti, restfulness, and Savadhanata. Savadhana means with attention. Attention to what? You don't have to teach anybody attention to the self. Everyone is naturally attending to their self. Okay? Even the martyr who is ready to die for the cause of his religion or something. Okay? Or mostly for destroying other people's religion. So, even that person says, I don't care for my own life. But he is paying attention to himself. That's not uncommon. You don't have to be a yogi. Mothers, altruistic people. Ramakrishna Mission sannyasis who are paying attention to poverty-stricken, drought-stricken, flood-stricken people, they can attend to others. That's also an object, in a sense. That's common. But a yogi sits in a meditation, is attending neither to the subject nor to the object, but in the middle. We'll come back to this in the very last few minutes. So, relations are everywhere. But it goes deeper than that. But feminist philosophers in the last 50 years, in America and in India and in England, everywhere, have been emphasizing against dominant Western individualism that we should change our metaphysics, our view of what exactly is a human being. And human being, the feminist philosophers have been saying, is not an isolated unit who together enter into a secondary thing called the collection of units, which we call a community, and then they have social contracts, and then the institutions emerge. Not like that. In fact, a stronger view would be, very few feminists actually say this, but they could be committed to this view that the individual I, is a fiction which is sliced out of the relational whole. That is more prior. It's not that I am first there, my mother is then there, independently. We choose, through a sort of maternal dating site to meet each other and establish a relationship. That's a completely false picture. I am part of mother. The umbilical cord is the sambandha that we see, is the relationship. And it's by cutting that cord that individuals exist. Individuals don't come first. That's the strong relational view of metaphysics. When they do that, but before that, the Indian tradition, both pluralists like Nyaya Vaisheshika, realists who think of different kinds of people, 7 types of realities, substance, quality, etc. I have talked about ordinary relationships, but they talk about some basic philosophical relationship. They are not philosophical in the sense that only in pages of philosophy books they exist. They exist everywhere. For example, the cloth and the color of this shirt, how are they related? This relation is called inherence. So, a hibiscus, this white lily, okay? Does anybody know the name of this? It's a beautiful name. It's called Casablanca. This lily is called Casablanca because it's white. So, Casablanca lily and the whiteness, they are related as substance and quality. Dravya and guna. And this relationship is called inherence. A more simple relationship, which can be the source of huge scientific debates, is the relationship of contact. happening here. This relationship exists, apparently, between one atom and another atom in the middle of any surface. Not only that, within an atom, this relationship exists of contact between the nucleus and the electron which is circling it, and further on. Now, what is the problem about that? The Buddhists saw a big problem about that. Why? It was supposed that even if atoms have parts, electrons also have parts, ultimately there will be something which is partless, which cannot be further divided. If it cannot be further divided, could one such thing be in the contact relation with another such thing? And the Buddhist logicians argued that that is not possible. Why? Look at the contact. This hand and this hand. Okay? In the Namaste posture, they're in contact, right? But this hand is not just the palm. This hand is the whole thing. This hand is the whole thing. Is this in contact with this? No. From this, there is a generalization. If A and B are in contact, for all A and for all B, if A and B are in contact, then there must be a part of A which is not in contact with another part of B. So contact is what is called a non-pervasive relation. Because if every part of this was in contact with every part of this, these two will become one object. In order for me, I may love you, I may give you a hug. I was telling some older people here who have been in this, before Swami Sarvapriyananda ji, there was a great loving monk who was the Swami in charge of this center. His name was Swami Tathagatananda. And whenever he saw somebody, he was tall and much bigger than Swami Sarvapriyananda ji. It was like he could, hug everyone, and he had an embrace. Now within his embrace, you felt like kind of melting away. He was so loving. But he did not become me when he embraced me. Why? Because there were parts of Tathagatananda ji which were not, thank God, in contact with me. Because my guts were not in contact with his guts. Okay? Even if all around, you say, well, what about if a iron ball is sunk in water? Isn't it all over connected to the water? No. Inside of the iron ball it is not. So any particle, any object which has any depth, any size, you call it partless and you say it is in contact with something else, that's contradictory. So even something simple as touching, as a relationship, has mysteries that philosophers have been struggling. Vasubandhu, in the 5th century AD, 5th century AD, 500 years after Christ, discussed this threadbare for hundreds of pages. And it's still being discussed. Okay, that's it. So, contact is a relationship. Inherence, the relationship between quality and substance. Okay, if this pencil rolls over, when a car moves, okay, Dr. Mattu's BMW is moving through a traffic-jammed New York thing. The movement is in the car by a relation. That same movement could be in another car. And Dr. Mattu's car may not have that movement when it stops, when it is in his garage. It is lacking that movement. But that movement can come. And this kriya, and interestingly, this action, this motion, this dynamic movement is the topic of the part 2 of Ishvara Pratyabhijna Vimarshini, which is the major, most famous text written by Abhinavagupta, which is a commentary on Utpala's book. And the second part, which in our group we have not yet started studying, is called Kriya Samuddesha, about actions. And that is where, in the second section of the second part, Sambandha is discussed. What are those Sambandhas? First Sambandha is very peculiar. We don't think about it often. But just as a meditator or an Indian philosopher of any school, Buddhist, Jaina, okay, even Socrates outside of India, a good philosopher, notices, apart from all these topics and books and other teachers and other schools, refutations, all that, every time it's like, that's why the philosophical activity at its best is similar to meditation. It's not just about getting your books published. It's about, thank you, it's about noticing what you are doing. What does a philosopher do? He thinks and he talks. How do we talk? Because without talking, there is no teaching, there is no learning, there is no lecturing, there's nothing. Some people think that all thought is internal talk. Abhinavagupta calls it antasanjalpa. Socrates, in a dialogue, Theaetetus, calls it thinking is conversation with oneself. How is conversation possible? Look at the word conversation. Con means with, like in contact. Okay? And conversation, versation, verse, shloka. Saying verses with somebody else. Now, how do you do it? Minimally, you need words. So, philosopher first notices where is the relationship most important between word and its meaning. Shabdartha sambandha. Shabda means word, artha means meaning. What is that? One of the greatest philosophers of India that everybody respects and who wrote a commentary on Patanjali's Mahabhashya of Panini and called Mahabhashya Deepika. He is a man called Bhartrihari who also wrote a book called Of Words and Sentences. Vakya Padiya. Vakya means sentence, Pada means words. And he discusses his chapter called Sambandha Samuddesha is the beginning of systematic discussion about 200 verses on Sambandha. What he is concerned about is not the Sambandha between lover and beloved, husband and wife, mother and child, seller and buyer, but between word and meaning. How come I make, to use the words of John Searle, a Berkeley philosopher who wrote a book called Speech Acts. He starts by saying, isn't it the most miraculous thing that I make some, with a bad voice like mine or a good voice like Sarvapriyananda, you make some acoustic blasts, like sounds. And as a result, somebody understands something. How is that possible? I say the sun is so many millions of miles away from the earth. I say light travels in such and such speed. I say fire is hot. The word fire or the word agni, from which the English word ignition has come. Okay, these words, they don't burn. Okay. Patanjali's own example, Mahabhashya's example. Even before that, Yaska's example. That when you say knife, your tongue is not cut. So where is the sharpness? Where is the knife? It's just K-N-I-F-E. How is it connected? Every time. Even a child, when he learns the languages, don't touch the knife. Do you mean don't touch K, don't touch N? Is that what you're saying? No. I'm not talking about the sound or the word or the letters. I'm talking about that object. Well, show me the object. Where is it? Well, it's connected to the word. The word brings it. You say, well, the Buddhist said, the word brings in mind. But when you say bring the knife to your, cooking assistant, bring the knife, I'll chop something. You don't tell them, bring your idea of the knife. You have to bring the real knife. So the real knife must be connected to the word. So word meaning relation has to be paid attention to. Attending to relation means attend to the relation between word and meaning. And I have said it in a very dry, analytical way. But if you notice your words, they not only relate to meanings, they relate to the reactions they create in the hearts of other people when you talk to them. And most talk, just as talks can cheer, if I tell you thank you, if I tell you congratulations, if I tell you I am so glad that you got the prize which I never got, if I can express joy in that, which is vanishingly rare. Compassion is common. If somebody is suffering, to feel compassionate, to feel my heart is going out for you, yourself, that's common. But somebody else has got an award. Unknown person. Not even enemies, just unknown person. To rejoice, to feel. I used to see that in my spiritual teacher. Today we must celebrate, he said. I said, why? Well, in another ashram, somebody has, published a great book. I said, do you know them? What is it to you? He said, but isn't it great? They have done this. Why is he celebrating? It is joy at somebody else's thing. Now, how is that possible? That's possible because he feels related to them. Because after all, it is not a matter of praising selfishness, but the Upanishads tell us one fundamental thing that no psychologist can ever, in the last 3,000 years, 4,000 years, they couldn't deny it, they will never be able to deny it, that things are loved because the self is loved. Things are loved because the self is loved. Okay? Now, this will sound like, that means if it is not connected to the self, if it is not my child who has won the Nobel Prize or something, why should I be? No, that's not the Upanishad what it's saying. It's saying the opposite way. If you can take delight in the fact that in Central Park, a very rare variety of magnolia has just blossomed. It's not yours. But if you are happy at that, that means there is actually, ontologically, really, there is a relation between you and the magnolia flower which you are being alerted to. That's why. Because ultimately the source of the bliss, of the joy, of the love, of the enjoyment is in the self. But that self is not just contained in this. It's in the magnolia flower. It's in the worm, which just before rainy season comes, it's in the ants, which make a line to take all the sugar or food that they might have and hide it in a corner or in a hole. The ants make a line. Okay. So, relation between word and meaning, relation between awareness or a perception or a thought and an object. I have a thought about tomorrow evening in Hunter College in New York City. We have another lecture on a totally different topic. Okay? And of course this topic is relation, so everything is related to everything. So that topic is dance, on the global relevance on Abhinav Gupta's philosophy of dance. So I'm thinking about that now. It has not yet happened. What is the relationship between my thinking and that future event? A pregnant woman is thinking, is in privacy, she's folding up the little baby clothes that somebody has given in the baby shower. What are you doing it for? That activity of carefully folding up the clothes, often no, yet to come child, that's a relational activity between thought and its intentional object. And it can be happy, can end in unhappiness also. Slightly irrelevant, but about intentional objects, about future objects, and this intentional relationship between a pregnant mother who is close to giving birth and the not yet born child. It's not just you'll say she is relating to the fetus inside. No, she's relating to the child who will come out in the future. And I said it can lead to sadness because one of the most poignantly powerful and tragic one sentence short story is by Mark Twain. In his end of his life, he submitted this short story and won a prize. It was supposed to be the shortest short story in the world. And that short story was one sentence. Newborns' shoes for sale, never used. Right? Relationship between the thought about the child and the child. And the child may not be there. My thought about a future. An engineer's thought about a bridge which will be built in 10 years is a relation. Very hard to figure out. Because of the two terms, one seems to be missing. But it cannot be. Shankaracharya in the beginning of Brihadaranyaka Upanishad Bhashya says this is the relation which is between Brahma's Sankalpa, Hiranyagarbha's, to create another world, just as previously Yatha Purvam Akalpayat. But that word is in the future. And it seems like Brahma is real, his thought is real, but what about the future object? He said, unless both are real, the sambandha could not be real. Therefore, the future effect is always pre-existent in the cause. The first argument for Satkaryavada that shows us that from this intentional relationship between a thought and its object, ultimately, Indian philosophers go to the relationship between cause and effect. So, karya karana sambandha, cause and effect. You start with ordinary examples, a lump of clay and the pot that will come out of it. You are learning pottery lessons. Lump of clay is the cause, pot is the effect. Right? And then there is a little bit of gold and the necklace which will come out of it. These are relationships. So, word meaning relationship, perception and object, thought and object relationship. I have already given the example of substance and attributes. Okay? An example of that would be, for example, the shape. Okay? You take a quarter or a dime, it is a piece of metal, it's a substance. It has a shape. That shape it shares with others. That round shape. There are 100 dimes. All of them have one shape. Circularity. But so many substances. So these are relationships that philosophers think about, and it's not so far from our life. Okay? Cause and effect. Then comes the biggest and the hardest moral relation with the ego and the other. And what all of us should wake up to is that what is the word for the other in Sanskrit, in Hindi, Bengali? Para. Para. P-A-R-A, which means the other person. Dusra. Nice. You see, you notice, dusra is second, right? Dusra. Pehla, dusra. So I am pehla, first. That person is a second person. Dusra, para. But Sanskrit is a spiritually sacred language. Why? There is a secret hidden in the fact, which is unique even in Sanskrit. A word has a meaning and a word and its antonym. So, manusha is a word, amanusha is non-human. It is opposite. They cannot be the same. But this is an exception. Para and apara mean the same. How come? Apara means not para. But how come para, other, means the same as apara? This should be thought about, right? So the other is the non-other. The anya, other, is the ananya, which is ultimately, at the end of the story, shows that it's not that there is something special about being me. Okay? A French philosopher called Emmanuel Levinas says this over and over again. And he says that our problem, all our suffering, all our sins, all our vices come from regarding and giving a special position to one of the relations, which is me. Who will? If I don't take care of myself, who will? So we teach, so in the name of teaching our children self-reliance, which is good. We also teach them selfishness. Okay? Take care of. Okay? Nobody is going to protect your ass. You have to protect yourself. So the rest of their life, they are constantly, going around like this, right? Right? Because everybody is attacking everybody all the time. This is like Hobbes said, it was the state of the society before the social contract. Our life is nasty, brutish, and he said short, but actually it's pretty long, meaning nasty and brutish. So this is because we think of the other as not as important as myself. But Levinas said, no, you have infinite responsibility to the other. Why? Because who do you think you are? Who am I? I am the other to the other. Isn't that true? It's very simple. Okay? If I'm telling my child or my student, you should always look after others. Sometimes my students say, you mean you? Like I should look after you. I said, no, others. I am me. You should look after others. So he said, who is the other? Well, if I'm talking, I would say, you are the other. So it's good if I take care of myself. No. When you are doing it, you should take care of me. When I'm doing it, you should take care of others. But why is this problem? Because we are not focusing on what is most important. The otherness between the two of us, in between. When we look deep into that otherness, what do we find? We find, now this is where I have been talking about philosophy and different relationships. I started with ordinary life, ordinary social relations. Okay? Now I am making the transition to a meditative experience. In the meditative experience, I want to openly, bluntly say that if you have learned, you wouldn't learn it from Sarvapriyananda because he doesn't believe in that. But you've, in all other organizations, all other places, including some of the other, even Ramakrishna Mission or my own, spiritual tradition, people will always tell you, give up philosophical thinking. Don't discuss. If you want to do spirituality, don't do any thinking analysis. In fact, meditation teachers charge you exorbitant amounts to teach you not to think. Okay? There is a very funny in the internet, all of you can find, and I'm promising you, you will spend hours laughing. It's a long thing called Thinkers Anonymous. If you have a thinking problem, like you are driving while you are thinking, then you can read that. How to get rid of the thinking problem. You have a very serious thinking problem. I do. I don't drive, that's why it's risky. I don't drive because I have a thinking problem. Okay? And in that state, so internet thing, you will see that at night you go back and you tried, your employer said, this is the last warning. If we see that at work you are still thinking, you will lose your job. Okay? And then you come and your wife says, I hate to crash, I hate to make it bad, give you the bad news. But yesterday night, I saw that you are waking up and reading a Nietzsche book. Have you started thinking again? Right? For God's sake, if you have to think in company of other people, don't think alone. So you can see, what is the word that they're thinking about, right? So, but here in Abhinav Gupta also has 4 methods. One of those methods actually gives up thinking, but that's not the only method he recommends. Vijnana Bhairava often recommends certain things which are without. But Abhinav Gupta has called in the middle the first upaya, the first method of spiritual practice. There are 4 methods. First method is called the atomic method, the method for small limited beings, rituals and different kinds of chants and all this. To most of us, that's the first method. The second method is what we are doing here, which is called Shaktopaya, which means the method of the mighty power. You take control by your thinking. You think clearly. You think not only, you first start by thinking about that straight, unmoving lamplight. You're focused on that. You forget about yourself, you forget about the room, you just look at that. Okay? That's grahya samvitti, only about the object. Then you forget about that object. You just think about your breathing, and you see beneath the breathing, there is the thinking, there is the manas, there is the minding, there is the intelligence. Then you think more and more deeper into yourself. What happens, what remains of me when I'm deeply asleep without dream? This is thinking about the grahaka, the graspa, the self. But a higher than both of these is when you focus neither on the ego nor on the object, but the middle between them. Is that possible? It's very hard. You know how hard it is? It is hard, and this is from Vijnana Bhairava, the Buddhist practice this. It is as hard as finding that fine hairline when your mind goes from one thought to another, to find that space between the two thoughts. With a little practice in meditation, we can notice that we are trying to think one thought, focus on one thing, think about Ramakrishna, think about Sarada. But after 2 minutes, I notice that at least 10 times my thought has gone to something else. How am I sitting here? What is the time? Is it time for dinner? I'm expecting a call. Okay? So it's possible to notice that you have been, what you thought to be continuous one point focusing is actually many points, but if you are good enough, then you keep coming back to it. But there is a detour sometimes. This is possible. But suppose the task is given by Vijnana Bhairava. That, and sometimes we do that, good psychologists and therapists sometimes tell you, that okay, you freely talk about whatever is coming to your mind. You are on the psychoanalyst's chair, couch. You are closing your eyes and say, oh, my mother didn't love me enough at night. My father used to torture me. Oh, no, they were very loving, but I miss them. And you talk about, in office this happened today. You're talking. But suppose the therapist is a hard taskmaster and says, can you tell me what is that link which took you from the first thought to the second thought? Not so easy. But this is not only the link that we are now talking about. We are talking about between one thought and another, there is a gap. The jump is not continuous. Find that line. Now we are becoming esoteric. The Indian psychologists discovered that if you directly try to find that middle point, that gap, that sky in the middle of relation, which in this book, Pratyabhijna Hridayam by Kshemaraja, this is called in the sutra number 17, Madhyavikasat Chidananda Labha. If you can expand that middle point, which is initially microsecond, if you can expand that, then you will get the best bliss of Chidananda. In two levels. One is the level of the mind, which is thought to thought jumping, that line between them. If you directly attack that, that's like directly trying to fall asleep, which is a sure recipe for not falling asleep. So if you forget about thoughts, and if you pay attention to breathing, then without a forcible blocking of breath, like kumbhaka in the middle, without that, if you naturally breathe, obviously the rhythm, when you in-breathe and when you out-breathe, you're not doing the same breathing. It's not possible. Nobody can. If I tell you, in-breathe in such a way, inhale in such a way that your breath comes out, that's a contradiction. You cannot do that. You cannot exhale while inhaling. So it comes one after another. And the Vijnana Bhairava technique is find that second, find that hairline between one breath and another. If you can find that, you will be able to find the hairline between one thought and another. And if you can focus that and expand that emptiness, then you will see the mystery of how two become one. Para becomes apara. How? At this point I am speaking a little mystically, but it's actually very practical. It can be done. And not only done in meditation. And one direct result of this, paying attention to the relation, is that you become your vulture-like grip over either your son or child or disciple. He's wrong, he should do this, I'm anxious about it. Either that, or your focus on yourself. I have thought enough about my children. I shall now, time for me, I'm retiring. I have to do something for my future. Both of these clutches loosen up a little bit. You'd say, if that loosen up, I'll lose my efficiency. Just the opposite. If you can attend to the relation between the two fully, some in the language of popular girlfriend-boyfriend romance talk, for at least last 100 years, it's almost like a Hallmark card thing. People say, I don't love myself, I don't love you, I love love. People say that, and teenagers say that all the time. What they're not realizing is that's very hard. Because in that case, even during a heartbreak, you don't feel bad. Because love is somewhere else. If not here, love is always there. It is the relationship. So I wouldn't go into any further detail here. But I have another agenda. Which is that these techniques, esoteric techniques, I have tried to make them intelligible to you. And why is it connected to the ordinary philosophical, metaphysical, scientific relation between one atom and another, or even social relations? They are not unconnected. The relation between one thought and another, the relation between a thought and its object. And if you look at grammar, our Indian language's grammar is all based on Sanskrit grammar. They are systematized into 6 relations. Whenever we talk, suppose we make sentences like, this gentleman is clicking a snapshot, a photograph. He is the doer. That's called karta or agent. Somebody does something. Actions are happening all the time. Okay? That lady is wearing a mask. Wearing a mask is an activity. Who is doing it? Agent. That's the first relationship between the action and who does it. Doing and the doer. But then does it to what? What is she wearing? Wearing is done by me. Okay? To the mask. The mask is the object. Okay? Arindam and Sarvapriyananda, they are doers. What are they doing? Drinking coffee. What are they drinking? Coffee. That's the second object. Okay? Vijnana Bhairava, in one of his 112 methods of concentration, says, while you eat something or consume something, smelling a nice perfume, touching a nice silk, try it so hard. If you are feeling the touch of the silk, okay, sometimes your focus is on how it feels to your hand. You are focusing on your palm. Sometimes, if you are a clothes merchant, you don't feel like your palm. It's the surface of the fabric. How is the fabric feeling? So, but if you try, I will not focus on the fabric. I will not focus on my palm. I will focus on the touching. That's sambandhe savadhanata, attending to the relationship. And Vijnana Bhairava says, you can become Jivan Mukta, immediately free, if you can fully focus on, in a moment of consumption, bhoga, not sacrifice, but enjoyment, or disgust. Opposite of bhoga, you hate something. But if you can focus in the middle, between the hater, you, the enjoyer, you, and the hated or enjoyed object, in between, then you can become liberated suddenly. This is a big promise. Why is it? Because it's very hard. And we are doing something almost against Shiva's orders by discussing this in public. Because Vijnana Bhairava says, what I am going to tell you, the goddess asked these questions. How is man to be liberated when they are all connected with these things? They are all related. Okay? Isn't liberation being free from all relations? Yes, it is. But you do that by focusing on the relation. By taking away your attention from the self and the object in between. But before saying these 112 methods of meditation, Shankara warns. He said, this is guhya. This is very secret of secrets. Lakshmanju, in his interpretation of that first verse, when Shankara congratulates Parvati, saying, Devi, you have asked a great question. And you know what? Lakshmanju says, the great question means there is nothing more to say about this. Your question has all the seeds of the explanation if you pursue that question. Because there is a deep relation between all our doubts and the answers to them. And the doubts are pregnant with the answers. The questions bear the child of the answers. And Abhinav Gupta, in another book called Paratringshika, actually reveals that. But he warns it is a secret. Because it is possible, not just children, that the adults will say, oh, I got a liberation from Arindam Chakrabarti I got from tomorrow morning. I will just put my mouth and tongue into this wonderful jam donut. And at the moment of enjoying the donut, I'll be liberated. No, only if you are completely indifferent to the donut. You are completely indifferent to your appetite or to your liking the donut. The liking is of the grahaka, of the eater. The donuts and its softness is in the grahya, but you have to focus on that enjoying. And the last thing I would say, because Swamiji and his parampara are known, this is called Vedanta society. Why am I talking about Tantra and Vijnana Bhairava? Swamiji also gave a couple of talks on Vijnana Bhairava in the YouTube. You might think, what does this have to? What is Vedanta? Simple answer, Upanishad is Vedanta. Nothing else. I mean, all the others are explanations. Upanishad is Vedanta. Why? Because they come at the end of the Vedas. Okay? The edge of the Vedas. Veda, Anta, Vedanta. So Vedanta is Upanishad. Where in the Upanishad do you find this attending to the relation? At the very heart of the Upanishad. Where? You know, all of you must have been, many of you have got lessons from Swamiji of the 5 different cases from which you separate yourself. We are encased by the gross body, then the subtle body, and then the buddhi body, and Vijnanamaya kosha, and all these koshas. The same Upanishad which talks about this ends by 3 ecstatic statements. First statement, and it is sung. It is said to be with, like in the middle of Indian classical music, you do ah. Like that, it is said hau, hau, hau. Taittiriya Upanishad. Taittiriya Upanishad. What do you sing first? It's all about eating. I love this passage because I am a glutton. So it says, Ahamannam, I am the food. You say, why am I saying that? I'm not the food. I am the food. Whose food? I'm death's food. My teacher used to say, when I was born from my mother's womb, I didn't fall on the bed or on the doctor's hand. I fell in the jaws of death. Death is going to eat me. It's eating me slowly. Okay? The baby is 1 year old. It's 1 year closer to death. So, ahamannam, mrityorannam. Okay? Ahamannam 3 times in Upanishad. Vedanta. Then ahamannada. 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 I am the eater of the food. I'm not that. I'm not this. I am the perceiver. I am the eater. Ahamannada. Ahamannada. But the ecstasy doesn't end there. There is a third one. Aham shlokakrit. I am the joiner of the two. Food and eater. This joiner. And what is the beautiful word? Shloka is a poem, a verse. What we are doing is a conversation. And in that verse, shloka is joining. Okay? First line with the second line. Okay? Dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara. First line. Add to that. Okay? The second line. What's the second line? Dehinosmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tatha dhyantara praptir dhiras tatra namuhyati. Right? 2 lines put together, shloka. I am the shloka krit. Okay? That's why I cannot enjoy my mukti alone. Shiva and Jiva will be liberated together. Why? Because I recognize myself in you. And I will keep on saying, Aham shloka krit. And I will say, in my ecstasy, I will be neither tat nor aham. I will be tvam, you, which is a little bit of I and a little bit of it, this. And that's why Swami Vivekananda's most favorite song was about the second person. Jo kuch hai, sab tu hi hai. And in one dialogue in Kathamrita, Sri Ramakrishna Kathamrita Gospels, Ramakrishna says, okay, it's your task to find out who you are. I am. Who am I? Who am I? Who am I? And he says, dig, 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 dig. And you dig to find out Ami, Aham. And suddenly, your digging spade turns and there is a metallic sound. That's the Tvam. He says, Ami kuchte, tumi meri hai pade. Okay? And this is not just a relationship I am discovering. Shloka Krit. This is God's own search. By forgetting himself and then again regaining this world he has. Tagore has this beautiful song with which I'll end. Just the first line. It's very nice in the Rag Desh. Tai tumar anando amar par. Tumi tai eshecho niche. This is why your joy is on me. Tumi tai eshecho niche. That's why you have come down, saying to God, Amay noile Tribhuvaneshwar. You, the Emperor, the Lord of the three worlds, who is the cosmic king. Amay noile, without me, Tribhuvaneshwar, tumar prem hoto je miche. Your love would have been meaningless without me. Amay niye milecho ei mela. More hridayer, in my heart, more hridayer, jugal sammilane. In the couple's union, in my heart, tomar ichha tarangiche, the wavy desire of power, ichha shakti of yours. Rabindranath, where did he get it? Not from Vijnana Bhairava, but from Taittiriya Upanishad. So Vedanta is also the message of paying attention to relation. Namaskar.
Professor, a million thanks. Thank you. We're so honored to have had you here. And I'd now like to invite Swamiji to say a few words.
Grahya grahaka samvitti samanyam sarvadehinam yoginam tu visheshosti sambandhe savadhanata. This experience of subject and object, it's common to all living beings. The uniqueness of a spiritual seeker, of a yogi, is the attention to this relationship, to the in-between. So my job is pretty simple, to give a short, no, it's not really simple actually, to give a short response to Professor Arindam Chakrabarti's extraordinary, I won't say talk, performance. His talks are performances. He is, not for nothing is he a trained classical singer. So when he gives a presentation, it's more like a work of art, you can see. Swami Vivekananda was like that. If you look at the talks given by Swami Vivekananda, he has a distinct message he wants to give, but it's not points like 1, 2, 3, 4. It's more like a classical music performance. He goes here, he goes there, he plays about with the main theme, and ultimately he wraps it all up nicely, beautifully. And Professor Chakrabarti always does that, and he's done it today again. I wanted a notebook to take some notes while Professor was speaking, and I'd never noticed this. This was on my desk. I don't know if you can see this. There's Shiva here. So I said, this is meant for today's talk, and I got this notebook. Swami Vivekananda says, oneness is the only religion. Oneness is the only religion. The Upanishad professor referred to, it says, Dvitiyad vai bhayam bhavati. From the second, there is fear. From the other, there is trouble, there is fear. When we have subject and object, I experience the world. I can see, hear, smell, taste, touch. You can consume, you can act upon, you can love, you can fight. Our relation to the world becomes something like a cat and a mouse. When we want something, we react to the world in terror or temptation, in fear or desire. So one way we relate to the world is like a cat watching a mouse. I'm going to eat it. I want this. Or the other way around, like a mouse watching a cat in terror. It's going to eat me up. It's going to hurt me. And this is because you have this subject and object split. There is this story I heard in Uttarakhand, in the Himalayas. There was a debate between a sadhu, a monk who was a non-dualist, and a pandit, a scholar, who was a dualist. There are separate realities, seer and seen, subject, object, God and devotee. They're separate realities. Dvaita means two. And the sadhu said to the pandit, and the pandit came and said to the sadhu, द्वैत ही सत्य है महात्मा जी, आप जो भी बोलिए. I'll tell you in Hindi and translate. Duality is the true teaching, oh Mahatma, whatever you say about non-duality. And the sadhu responded by saying, द्वैत सत्य है, duality is true, ये तो ये गौ भी जानती है. तू पंडित है तो कोई नई चीज बता. If duality is true, even that yonder cow knows it, because it knows that I am the eater and the grass is the eaten. It can't express it, much less talk in Upanishadic Sanskrit, just like our professor has quoted, but it feels it. And Vijnana Bhairava says, Samanyam sarvadehinam, all embodied beings have this structure of experience, subject-object. I am the eater of the grass is the eaten. And the sadhu said, if you are a pandit, if you are a scholar, really a pandit, say something new, something other than what the cow is saying. I think it's the difference between descriptive metaphysics and revision, was it Professor Strawson, who is the guru in Oxford University of Professor Chakrabarti. There's one kind of philosophy which you do, you just describe what is there and build up your philosophy according to it. Another one, you say what is there, what it appears to you is not the ultimate truth. You have to dig deep and find a truth which is not apparent. So Advaita Vedanta is like that. Nyaya might be more descriptive. Advaita Vedanta and Vijnana Bhairava are more revisionary. So they dig deep and they claim that the truth underlies it. But Vijnana Bhairava and Kashmiri Shaivism seems to have the merits of both. And that's my response today. First, what would Advaita say to this? If you give me this verse, what do I make of it? And then we'll contrast it with what Professor Chakrabarti made of it. If you give me this verse, that the subject and the object, this structure of experience is common to everybody, but the yogi, the speciality of the spiritual seeker, is attention to the in-between, attention to the relation. What is the relation? The Advaitic way is pretty clear, but I'll tell you later why it's not satisfactory. It's a little, I would say, a shady maneuver. I'll quote none other than Swami Vivekananda, who says, one alone exists. It appears as nature, soul. Consciousness alone exists. Brahman alone exists. It appears as that and the I, the grahaka, the consumer, and the consumed. The scared one and the fearful thing. The tempted one and the tempting thing. So it appears like that. But one alone exists. At the level of appearance, these are two. It's not even that consciousness itself has become all of this. No. Swami Vivekananda, he writes this poem to Mary Hale, and she had written a poem saying that, I have understood what you have taught, that God is everything. And Swami Vivekananda said, I have never taught such strange doctrine, that God is all. You said it. No. What I meant was, God alone is true. All else is nothing. These are his exact words. All else is nothing. What I said was, pray remember, God alone is true. All else is nothing. That's very Advaitic. Then the path to understanding this verse becomes very easy. It works like this. Imagine I'm eating a cookie, grahaka, the eater, and the cookie is grahya, the eaten. And then suddenly I snap out of it, I wake up and I realize I was just sleeping on my bed. It was a dream. So, that was a dream. Now, how do I relate to the eater and the eaten, which I just experienced? I relate it as both are cancelled, both are negated, both are, in technical terms, badhita. I did experience it, but now I realize that there was no cookie. It was my mind imagining it. Well, you were there at least. You were there. No. I was not there as the eater of the cookie. I was there as the mind dreaming it. But I was not the eater of the cookie. The agent of that action, no. That was also not true. So I did not eat the cookie. There was no cookie to be eaten. And the action of eating also was not there. All were appearances, a superimposition, adhyasa, on the reality underneath, which was a dreaming mind. Therefore, what follows is, exactly like that, if you can import that understanding into this world, there is this one underlying existence consciousness bliss in which appears subject and object, grahya grahaka. And the way to overcome, and that's the source of all problems, the way to overcome this is attention to what is appearing as both. So what is appearing as both? These two. Advaita Vedanta itself says that there is one reality underlying all of these. And there is, that reality alone appears through the power of Maya as all of this. Now, what is my problem with that? I'll say that and then see how Professor's approach is better actually. Notice, first of all, the verse does not say, and also the Taittiriya Upanishad does not say an underlying reality, does not even hint at the falsity of the seer and the seen, the subject and object. You're making a huge sacrifice to go to oneness. The huge sacrifice is the entire universe. Swami Vivekananda says it's like a man who, there's a fly sitting on his head, and to get rid of the fly, he gave it such a whack, the fly did die, but you killed the man also. So we dismiss the world and dismiss the individual, the subject and the object, and we discover a reality underlying it. Now, this procedure, though it is quite accepted, there's a technical term for this in Advaita Vedanta, which is called Badhayam Samanadhikaranyam, which is, you see two things are the same. Why? Because they are not two things. There's something else appearing as two. The cookie and the eater are the same. How? There's no cookie, there's no eater. You are dreaming both. In that sense, they are the same. There is a mirror in which you see a city. And you say the sky and the lake are the same. How can the sky and the lake be the same? There's no sky there, there's no lake there. It's just glass. It's a mirror. It's appearing in that way. There's only Brahman appearing in all this way. But it's much harder to do this if you accept, if you take the more common sense, more acceptable way of saying, no, there is a world. There are people. And there are, I am also there. And there are relationships with people. There is pleasure. There is pain. And there is also the seeking for the ultimate and the release from pain and the search for fulfillment. How do you do that while maintaining the reality of the world? While taking grahya and grahaka, subject and object, seriously. While taking the relation between them seriously as the relation between them. Advaita Vedanta doesn't do that. It dismisses both of the nodes and discovers an underlying reality. But keep both the nodes and the relationship between them. And by probing into the relationship between them, how do you discover that one also all-pervading reality? So this was what Professor Chakrabarti attempted, and I think in great measure succeeded in doing today. So I think the next thing will be the question answer. Yes, thank you so much.
I would like to briefly react to what you said.
Certainly.
And then field questions.
Yes, please come. So I think the next thing would be a Q&A. So if you have questions, raise your hand. Professor Chakrabarti will give comments to what I just said, reaction to a reaction, and then he will take your questions, but the questions have to be very brief and to the point. You raise your hand, the professor will ask you to come there, you come and sit there in that chair and use the microphone and tell us your name and ask your question.
I was so relieved to hear that even Swamiji dreams of cookies. Because I do that all the time. And also, I had forgotten, and thank God I did, because that would have lightened the mood. Nyaya people who are not non-dualists, and I'm usually associated with realism and Nyaya and all that, but they have done, after Bhattacharya, the biggest research into different kinds of relations. And the name of the relations, I talked about contact, that is called Samyoga. And Utpaladeva wrote a book called Sambandha Siddhi, where he divides the word Sang, Bandha, into Sang, together, Bandha, tying, binding together. Even in consciousness studies, the biggest problem is called the binding problem. How can so many things that we are thinking about, even in something like that flower is white. Okay? There are so many things going on there. It's, and all of these are bound together by one thing. My consciousness brings them together. It's a binding agent. And then the next relation is Sambandha, Samavaya. Samyoga, Sambandha, Samavaya. Swarupa is also another relationship. So Sambandha is something that Nayayikas are constantly talking about. But there was an unknown Advaitic, non-dualist poet, who wrote a sort of sarcastic verse. Must have been a Bengali. But there were Bengali non-dualists, even before Vivekananda. Lots of them, Madhusudana Saraswati, at the time of Akbar. But he made a very nice joke. Because in Bengali, brother-in-law is called Sambandhi. Sambandhi, brother-in-law. And one has a very sort of love-hate relationship, which in ordinary Hindi is called Sala, which is an abusive word. Sala. Since Nayayikas are concerned about Sambandha, in this verse, he calls all Nayayikas Sambandhis. Okay? This I would not explain it, but I'll tell you later on. Bhavad abhavad yadinatirikta sambandhibi svikriyate padartha. So, he was challenging. On a more serious note, we have not talked about this much, but the history of it is, I told you that Bhartrihari, who is concerned immediately with word and meaning, he writes a big chapter called Sambandha Samudesha. There he establishes that the relationship between word and meaning is so mysterious that if you point out the third element in between and you say, that's the relation, then you make a mistake, because then the relation between that third element and the other ends, that becomes another relation. And you will go on forever. So A and B, R is the middle relation, but R and B, R and A. So this problem led to, and this was discussed by Aristotle, it was called the third man problem. Okay, relation. This was responded to by a great Buddhist logician from South India called Dharmakirti. Okay, and Dharmakirti wrote a book called Sambandha Pariksha, rejection of all relations. Relations are not real. And he said, very nicely, by themselves, the momentary entities in the world, everything is actually unmixed with another thing. Amishraha. Mishra means mixed. Amishra swayam bhavaha. Tan yojayati kalpana. It is our imagination that connects them. Things are not connected by themselves. They are independent, spike-like. Like nails sticking out. Our kalpana relates them. Utpaladeva, the great Kashmiri philosopher, who was actually drunk with the bhakti for Shiva, because Utpaladeva's best work, I don't say that often in our IPV group, Utpaladeva's best work, on which Kshemaraja wrote commentary, the same Kshemaraja whose Pratyabhijna Hridayam I was talking about, is Shiva Stotravali. His verses to Shiva, loving verses. Okay? And all Kashmiri acharyas, including in our times, Lakshmanju, have written commentaries on that. How can you write commentaries on hymns? You'd be amazed. It is more philosophical, more spiritual than Utpaladeva's other philosophical books. He wrote Sambandha Siddhi in answer to every word of Dharmakirti, refuting them. And said, who says that things are independent? Sambandha, relation, is the heart of things. Why? Because in relation, two things become one. Ekaneka prakara. Okay? When you concentrate either intellectually or meditatively on relations, two-ness melts into oneness. So, on the one hand, it would seem like in his Advaitic, non-dualistic moment, Vivekananda is exaggerating by denying the world. And it seems that Vijnana Bhairava is keeping both sides and is much richer. But the relation between these two are actually like the relation between two eyes. One eye is the pure, strict, rigorous non-dualism. One is real, everything else is false. From which it follows relations are unreal. Because Shankaracharya refutes relations like Dharmakirti. Utpaladeva, relations are real, another eyes. Where is the truth? In the middle. That's the real truth. Any questions? Yes.
Thank you for your lecture. I really appreciated it. I'm not very well read, so it would save me an enormous amount of time figuring this out if you can answer this question. I easily accept that I need to find the middle of the relationship. And when you talk about the breath, go in and out, when you slow it down, it's easier to find that point. So when I think about relationships, personally, to find the middle, the best way to do it would be to understand the energy. When you have a thought, energy is admitted. And when you have emotion, energy is admitted. I know I've said, you're draining me in relationships. Where's my energy going? Or when I get excited. So it would be assumed that you're taking and going. Having said that, when you're focused, your brain is on a certain vibration, a wavelength. And the higher vibration you go to, the easier it is to slow down a problem, to see it, to understand it. How do you translate this into finding? How can you use, is that information relevant to find the middle? And how to do it?
Thank you. As you know, whether in strict, rigorous science or physics, or in popular spirituality, the term energy, however often it is used, is not easy to define. We don't know exactly what we mean by energy. And it doesn't help us to say just superficially that whatever Einstein was saying when he was saying E equal to mc squared, that energy is what we are talking about. But instead of snubbing popular spirituality, I feel like giving it some respect and see what do we mean by energy? I feel more comfortable if I translate it into the original Sanskrit, which is called Shakti, which means power, right? And there are many books by one, it was his, I think, pseudonym, Sir John Woodruff, wrote a book called Shakti and the Shaktas and so on. So Shakti is power. When we talk about, there is middle all through in the body, in the spiritual anatomy of the body, you know that there are 3 channels in the back, and the middle channel is called the Sushumna, that's called Madhyanadi. So all of this. But what does that got to do with energy or Shakti or power? Now think in a very simple concept. I have seen that the greatest teachers take the simplest examples. So take a magnet. It has the power. The magnet itself is lying there. It is not the power. The magnet is not the power. The iron that it attracts towards yourself, the iron filings, if you take the magnet close to them, the iron filings go and stick to the magnet. They are not the power also. Where is the power? The power is in the middle, between the magnet and the iron. Now, this is just an analogy. Okay? Anywhere when you talk about capacity, ability, power, these are all energy words. Okay? Somebody may be able to do something, but may not actually do it. In the morning today, I had a very heavy suitcase, and I was very scared. Sarvapriyananda ji was offering as a night host, let me take it up. I said, Does he have the power to do that? Suppose he hurts his back. Because in his body you can't see the power. In fact, you can never see powers. Powers are not visible. With that power, the action that is done is visible. If I ask you, you've seen magnets, you've seen irons. Have you seen magnetism? No, those are energies. That doesn't mean if you don't see it. So one little nice corollary from that is that everything that you don't see is not unreal, because power is, you'd say, I can see power here, there is power. If there is a power cut, this is not power, this is the effect of power. Electricity is the power. Do you see electricity? No. If any of you had high school physics, you would know there's a beautiful experiment called cathode ray experiments. There's a green light apparently comes. You can't see the ray. Okay? It falls on a surface. In fact, it may sound paradoxical, but photons, which make up light, they're energies, power. You don't see them. It falls on a surface, you see the surface. Photons are not visible. And the most beautiful, intimate thing is that Abhinavagupta says, between aham, I, and the other object is the you. When somebody addresses you, if they talk about you, they're not treating you as a power. They're treating you as an object, as what in Sanskrit is called a jada, as an inane object. I can manipulate you. When I say your name, for example, I say Sushma, I'll make Sushma cook something. So Sushma is just an instrument, an object. If I talk about myself as I am very special, egotistic. But when I say, Sushma, I want you to look at me, I address as a you, I recognize that although she is not me, she has a me in her. So she is a mixture. She's in between me and the other. So Abhinavagupta says, you or tvam in Sanskrit is the middle, some middle between I and tat. It's the middle. That's why in English, in Sanskrit, it's called Madhyama Purusha. The middle voice, the addressee who can speak back. And Tantric theory, Shaiva, Kashmir Shaivism theory is aham may be Shiva. I am ultimately Shiva. Tat, sa, asau, that person, that is Pashu. That's like in bondage objects, ordinary finite beings. But tvam is Shakti. Whenever you use something, you are not making it your ego, neither are you making it just an object. It is a you. And a you is the power. So you can talk. The child brings alive its Barbie doll by talking to it. I saw yesterday all night and day, Rakesh and Sushma, they were in their house. They were constantly conversing with the dog. What are they talking to? Not that white big object. Not that howling, growling object. Not that sleeping, furry object. But the power in it. Because Shakti is the middle power. Whenever we use somebody, we are not eyeing them in the sense of making them I, and neither are we eyeing them EYE as an object. We are giving it a respect of it. And the dog, she sometimes obeys, sometimes does not. Why? And the secret of all energy, including the dog's energy, is freedom. It has swatantra, freedom, which this does not have. It's an object. I can grasp it, I can stop it, switch it off. You can't switch off a dog. It has its own freedom. It's a little bit of an object, little bit of a subject. It is a power. Power is the middle. Thank you. Yes, Rakesh, please come here.
Thank you, Professor Arindam. As always, your talks set so many things on fire. Relationships. Is it possible to look at relationships as a field of potentiality that gives you an opportunity to be greater than what you are as a node? So every relationship gives you that potentiality. And is it possible to think that by focusing on the relationship, you are gaining the power of becoming Brahma, a creator? I personally find in real life that the best relationships I have are the ones that have the greatest creative energy, that something really creative comes out of the relationship. So,
thank you. Thank you.
Reactions
and
to...
partly consciously and partly unconsciously, you have touched many nerves in my talk. Because this idea of becoming somebody more than you are, more than myself, not only discovering myself, not only discovering that I am the ultimate Brahman, but something more than even that. This was the theme of Rabindranath Tagore's philosophy when he gave the lectures called Religion and Man. He had his last chapter called The Surplus in Man. Surplus, additional. Now, we all credit him because of such a creative exuberance that more than necessary, more than I imagined. My imagination allows me to go beyond the imagination. You all know my student, PhD student called Ian. We have just submitted to a journal a paper on, and we are writing another one, on the unimaginable. And look at we were talking about energies, which I call power. He's talking about capacities. It is not just a spiritual method, not just a logical solution to the problem of relations, but it is, as you said, creativity's sport, a playful creativity, to focus on the middle and explore what is in that in between. In fact, in aesthetic theory of enjoyment of either a sunset beauty or the painting by Turner of a sunset, what is happening is what Kant calls a reflective judgment, where the enjoyment brings out something in the painting which is more than the painting. And it brings out, as a relisher, as an appreciator, as a connoisseur, something that I did not know was there in me. What is that? That is the surplus. And the source of that surplus, and it is infinite. So infinite that logically it can be shown that the unimaginable is also within the power of the imagination. By the simple logic, if I say a blue smell is unimaginable, right? A color in the scale D sharp is unimaginable because colors don't have scales. Smells. But when I am announcing, what am I announcing to be unimaginable? Not the smell, not the color, but the combination of the two. The combination I'm calling unimaginable. When calling it unimaginable, am I not imagining it? So imagination is the power, Kalpana. And Abhinav Gupta calls Kalpana the greatest goddess. The Buddhists are aware of Kalpana. We should stay away from Kalpana because they create falsehoods. Vikalpa is bad. Abhinav Gupta and the Tantras say, Kalpana is our greatest creativity. How did Brahma, God, create the world? By Kalpana, imagining. Yata purvam akalpayat. But in doing that, and this is the final corroboration of your idea of self-surpassing, the Purusha, the ultimate primal cosmic being called the Purusha, in the Purusha Sukta, in Rig Veda, what did he have to do? He filled up the 3 worlds. He made the universe and he exceeded it by 10 fingers. Purusha, eveda gum sarvam, yat bhutam, yat cha bhavyam, future, past, everything is that Purusha. Okay? It has 1,000 heads. 1,000 means innumerable. Sahasra shirasha, purusha, sahasraksha, sahasrapat, sabhuming, sarvatah vritva. All. How can there be more than all? There is. More than all. Sarvatah spritva, atyatishta dashangulam. And I have found in the poetry of Abhinavagupta a very intimate interpretation of this. Not directly, but hint, a suggestion. What are these 10 fingers with which we can exceed? Brahma exceeded. These. We can make things. Dashangulam. And that's what I'll be talking about tomorrow. Because with the hand gestures, there are 55 hand gestures. Natya Shastra says, the dancer shows Yashoda, mother of Krishna. Krishna has been just caught stealing butter. She does this in the dance. Krishna is being scolded. Krishna has stayed away all night, didn't come to Radha. Radha is suspicious. A dancer is dancing, showing that. Krishna comes and Radha says, where have you been all night? This posture in the dance. By that loving suspicion is all proved by where have you been? Okay? A bird is coming and dancing. With these 10 hands, you never thought you'll be able to do that. You exceed yourself. You show this. Okay? Child does the shadow play. You'll show a deer. With that, hands can do what even the owner of the hand never imagined. I have to add an anecdote. There was a great Bharatanatyam dancer called Yamini Krishnamurti. You know, there is this organization in India called SPICMACAY. They bring scholars. In St. Stephen's College, I listened to Yamini Krishnamurti giving a performance lecture demonstration. She was saying, these are the Suchi is the one of the hand gestures. Okay? And, eye gestures, all that. So somebody said, do you all learn it from your teacher or do you invent? He said, of course, we are always inventing. So give us an example of something which is in no dance text. No one has taught it. Just now, impromptu, tell us. Yamini Krishnamurti says, okay, let me think for a minute. And then she showed. He said, suppose I'm telling the story of Mahabharata, 100 sons of Dhritarashtra. How would I show 100? She says, I'll take my Suchi hand here. And from the eye gestures chapter, I will roll my 2 eyes twice. Once here, once here. 100 sons. Thank you.